Mr. Narendran, thank you for joining in. Congratulations as well on your new appointment. Although, in a sense, you've been watching this tidal wave of COVID through last year, since you were handling things at CII for the vaccination task force as well. Let me ask you, though, what to your mind is the primary challenge for industry in this year, post the second wave and the enormity of it?
So second wave has been brutal in many ways, right? I think everyone has been impacted. When we looked at our members, we found that most of them have been impacted significantly. The employees have been impacted. So it's kind of left people, more impacted than the first wave, which was, I would say, more impactful from an economic point of view, less impactful from a humanitarian point of view, apart from the problems we saw with migrant workers. But wave two has impacted everyone directly, more directly, because everyone knew somebody who was impacted badly. Right? So if I look at industry, I think obviously the first and foremost priority is to see how can we, if not avoid a COVID-3, how can we mitigate the impact of COVID-3? And that's where vaccination becomes extremely important. Yeah. Industry has already put in the protocols after COVID-1. So that's why COVID-2 was handled by industry much better. And I dare say that many of our members said their factories were safer than places outside the factory because you have the protocols in place, right? So we need to make sure that the vaccination happens as fast as possible and to as many people as possible. That is one. And that's important to get the growth back, because if you have 9.5% growth, you're just going back to where you were 2 years back, right? But we also believe, and we've talked about it, is that while just now there is a shortage of vaccines and there are more people willing to be vaccinated than there are vaccines. But we believe that could shift in a couple of months when more vaccines are available, and as you go more and more into rural India to vaccinate, because we see a lot of vaccine hesitancy there, a lot of vaccine paranoia there. And unless we address that upfront, you will have a situation 2-3 months from now where there are vaccines, but people are not willing to be vaccinated. And that doesn't reduce the risk of COVID-3, because we need to make sure maximum people are vaccinated in the next few months.
Yeah. As you said, there is certainly vaccine hesitancy, especially in rural parts of India. Equally, though, I think the last few months have been a sharp lesson in vaccine inequity, given the prices that are available by private manufacturers in private hospitals. Are you concerned about the disjointedness of economic recovery that we may see over the next 12 months because of how choppy this entire vaccination terrain looks?
It is, but I think if I look at COVID-2 from a lockdown point of view, because there were multiple local lockdowns, you did not have whole supply chains closed. Yeah. So, and I think industry was better prepared for some of this volatility. So, whether it's in terms of keeping more inventory than you would normally do, de-risking your supply base if you are located too much in a red zone. You would look for suppliers outside of a single location, etc. So I think industry did multiple things to make sure that the economic impact of these disruptions are minimized, and that will continue to happen, right? Mm. The second thing which is working in favor of industry is globally markets are much better, right? So if I look at last year, this time, and this year, there's far more optimism in global markets because of the way US is
financial
recovering.
The only one who's feeling good right now, no?
No, I'm talking of demand. If you look at growth in US, they had forecasted 3.5% growth. Now they're saying 6.5% growth. China is already at a pre-pandemic level in terms of economic activity. So because of the stimulus packages that multiple governments have announced, right? So I'm not talking in terms of the emotional outlook. I'm looking more at the economic outlook. And so to that extent, exporters in India have a greater opportunity because the developed world is recovering much faster than we had thought, right? So yes, it's very disruptive to have COVID-2, COVID-3, COVID-4 or whatever and multiple lockdowns. Some of it we've learned to deal with. Some of it gets addressed because export markets are strong. But ultimately, we need to make sure that India is safer from multiple waves of COVID through more vaccination.
This is a good cue up for my next question, which is that I think you indicated this is a good time for more fiscal measures and a fiscal package. CII's indication is about 1.3%, in terms of GDP. This is modest compared to what many other countries have spent on their fiscal package, but it is still a big step forward from what the government finally ended up spending last year. How hopeful are you of a generous fiscal package? Because the government seems to have decided that the way forward is perhaps to be more tight-fisted rather than show largesse in terms of financial packages.
Yeah, no, that's a fact. I think as an industry body, our job is to ask and keep pushing, right? Because I think from the government's point of view, they're saying, hey, where's private sector investment? Why can't private sector do more, right? Rather than look at the government. So we understand, we recognize that. But I think that's why our request on the fiscal measures is more targeted at the more vulnerable parts of industry who've not, recovered yet. There are parts of the industry who've recovered. So we are not asking for any support for them. They should take care of themselves. In fact, even take care of the others. But there are parts of the industry like the high contact sectors. If you look at retail, hospitality, restaurants, employ a lot of people and they've been disrupted for too long. The bigger ones amongst them may survive, but the smaller ones are struggling because they have fixed costs to cover, they have wages to cover. You look at the aviation industry, big companies, but struggling because oil prices are going up. The traffic is still at a very low level. So that's why many of our suggestions are focused specifically on these sectors. And the other thing is how can we make sure that more money goes to the people through increasing the allocation to the Manrega scheme, reducing the GST for consumer goods so that people have to spend less on daily stuff. So this is the mix of what we've asked, not an overall let's help everyone kind of request.
So more money in more pockets for those who need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Two other things, though, have been happening, Mr. Narendran, and that's not COVID specific. It's been happening for many years now. One is the fact that capital investment by corporates and large companies has actually been slipping steadily quarter after quarter. And the other is the escalating unemployment numbers. I mean, where we stand right now is, of course, completely scary, but it's not new to us. Unemployment numbers have been on the rise. I wanted to know your thoughts on it and, what you think might be the solutions out of both of them. Encouraging corporates to pump in more money via capital investment and fixing or at least addressing this unemployment crisis.
Yeah. So I think one is linked to the other, right? So if I look at capital investment, right? So it's a fact that most of the capital investments over the last few years have been driven by government, either directly by government in infrastructure and things like that, or railways, oil and gas, where your public sector companies or the government effectively spending the way. But the reason is that private sector investments, will follow growth in demand, will follow better capacity utilization, and will follow better profitability, right? Because it's private sector, right? You should have the cash to be able to spend. You should be able to justify the investments. And the problem has been even before the pandemic, right? If you look at auto industry, for instance, they've been slipping for the last 3-4 years, right? Go back next year, they will go back to where they were 4 years back, right? The rest of industry goes back to where they were 2 years back, right? So you've seen a slippage in economic activity across sectors for 3-4 years, and that has not helped the mindsets and created mindsets for investing in new capacity. Second thing which has happened is, if you look at the last 10 years, couple of sectors where a lot of capital was invested on the ground of power and steel. Yeah. And they were the largest NPAs for the banks. So the banks were reluctant to lend to these sectors till it was cleaned up. Most of the IBC cases were companies from these sectors. Now they've got cleaned up. They've all shifted ownership, or many of them have shifted ownership. They're being made more productive use of. Banks have got back a lot of the money. So I think a lot of that cleanup has happened also over the last few years. So now we are at a stage where some of these sectors, and I talk about metals, for instance, or steel more specifically, though I'm here to talk more SCI rather than Tata Steel. But still, if you see the steel sector, you're seeing utilization up, demand is growing, profitability is improving. So everyone in the steel industry has announced expansion. I think if you count up the announcements, 50,000-60,000 crores of investment by private sector in the steel industry over the next 2-3 years has been announced, and everyone is expanding. So it will happen, and it's just a question of getting that cycle back, and that's why growth is so important, because that's when private sector capital can get reinvested for growth. The second point is FDI has been still strong. If you look at the FDI last year at 81 billion, which is more than 73 billion the year before, and a lot of it is also coming into areas like electronics manufacturing, where there is investments going. And the third area where private sector investment is happening is in supply chains. So if you look at warehousing, a lot of, again, on the back of the e-commerce companies, there's a lot of private sector investment going into logistics and supply chains. So there are pockets where it's happening, but obviously we need to do more.
I do want to
And if I come to jobs, sorry, I missed the point on jobs. So in some sense, what will follow is then jobs will be created once you have private sector investments. But I think for jobs to be created, the focus on infrastructure that the government announced in the budget is extremely important, because construction and manufacturing are a very important bridge between an agrarian and a services economy. So if you want to create jobs far away from the urban centers, semi-skilled jobs, nothing better than construction. And I think that's where the infrastructure spend that the government has been talking about is extremely crucial to create more jobs.
Would you bat for an urban jobs scheme, something that was discussed before the budget, but did not make it to the list of what came through?
I'm not so sure about urban jobs, as I feel to have more equitable growth, you need to have jobs outside of urban areas also. Because I think if you look at the services-led growth that India has had, or consumption-led growth that India has had over the last decade or so, it's created a lot of urban jobs. But I think, if you look at the migrant worker issue, why is there a migrant worker issue? Because people are all moving away from areas where there are not enough jobs into urban areas where there are jobs. So how can we create jobs closer to where people live? Because that's what people want, right? And which means some of the states in the eastern region, for instance, right, which are geologically rich, very fertile, a lot of opportunity for food processing, a lot of opportunity for mining and metals. So we need to look at how to have investments going into many of those states also, so that you can create jobs closer to where people live.
I take your point about, growth not being strong enough and demand offtake being quite sluggish for corporates. But the counter argument to that has been that quite a bit of relief has been provided to India Inc. as well. For 2 budgets consecutively, there were tax rate cuts that were given. The hope was that some of that money would be plowed into capital investment, but it was not. And this year, for the first time in 12 years, we have tax collections, income tax collections that are actually lower than personal income tax collections. In a K-shaped recovery, such as what it looks like right now, do you think there could be a case made for a relook at what our tax structures and slabs look like, and who shoulders what end of that burden?
Sure, but I also think that after the tax cuts, how long have we had? And you had a pandemic and 2 waves of COVID in between, right? So I think it's too short a time to come to a conclusion on that. That is one. Second point I want to make is we should not look at tax just as corporate tax. We should look at the effective tax rates. You look at what are the other direct or indirect taxes that corporates pay. If I take something like mining, the effective tax rate is 60-65%, if not more, because you pay so many other, you pay royalty, you pay cess, you pay this, you pay that. Even if you look at 2% CSR, while many of us spend far more than 2% on CSR, but if you force that, that's obviously in some sense a tax, right? So when you look at the effective tax rate, it's much higher than the corporate tax rate headline that you are seeing, So that's one thing to look at. And ultimately, yes, private sector has to invest and will invest. And I think we have to allow them some more time. That's the way I see it. And I think the steel industry is a classic example. While everyone will say steel prices are high, profits are very high, but look at the investments that are being announced. So I think it's just coming back.
I want to go back to the point that you made about recapitalization of banks, the fact that another 20,000 crores should be plowed into banks. And this time I'd like you to wear your Tata Steel hat, not so much your CII hat. What's your own sense of what we might end up with in the months to come in terms of an NPA situation? The Reserve Bank has raised some alarm bells already, but how escalated do you think it could get?
So I think what I heard from my colleagues in CII who read the RBI report was that while there may be some alarm, but the numbers have not changed much. I think what I understand is it's not been as bad as people thought, or it's not changed as much as people thought. But yes, there is a lot of distress in the MSME sector. I think the big companies are much better off. That's clear. When you talk of a K-shaped recovery, yes, you're right. The bigger companies have recovered faster. But I think we should be watchful of the MSME sector. We should be watchful of the hospitality industry and sectors which have been significantly travel and tourism related, etc. And that's why we feel that some relief needs to be given to them to get out of this crisis, because some of them were profitable businesses till COVID happened. So it's not that fundamentally there's anything wrong in their business model. It's just that circumstances are such that these are high contact businesses and they've suffered the most. Right? Even if you look at aviation, right? I mean, they've really suffered very significantly.
What is your sense of what the best solution for MSMEs is at this point, Mr. Narendran? I mean, it's an open secret that they are bleeding and that they have suffered, significantly from demonetization to GST introduction to, at this point, 2 waves of COVID. But it looks like we haven't been able to address their plight, in the right manner. What is it that is required and needs to be done on a war footing?
So I don't think there are any easy solutions, but I have some thoughts which I can share, right? So firstly, we should start looking at MSME at a subsector level, because we look at MSMEs as if they are one homogeneous lot. They are not, right? There are MSMEs who are globally competitive, who are world-class, who are exporting, and many of them doing very well, right? They're no longer dependent on the Indian markets. They may be supplying to auto companies globally or whatever, right? So there are many of them who are good. They are like the MSMEs that you will see in Germany or Italy. World-class product, world-class quality, can compete, right? Then there are MSMEs who are very dependent on local businesses. There are MSMEs who are very dependent on the government business. MSMEs who are very dependent on 1 or 2 companies. They may be in the neighborhood of one large company and supplying to them. So we need to divide the problem into different types of MSMEs and sectoral issues, and work on them. And I think as CII, we want to do that, because 80% of our members are MSMEs. The bigger members are more visible, but 80% of our members are MSMEs, right? Secondly, in the medium to long term, we need to really see how can we create an ecosystem of world-class MSMEs in India. There are quite a few, but we can create a lot more. I would say the biggest cluster of world-class MSMEs in India are those linked to the auto industry, right? Because auto industry has driven quality consciousness and competitiveness. And I think all big companies need to develop a vendor base like the auto industry has done. And then they become ready to face the rest of the world. Secondly, as CII, we are working to see how can we help some of them in the digital transformation that's happening. So we are setting up a digital center, because again, big companies can take care of themselves, but the MSMEs need help in some of these things. We also feel MSMEs need to be more R&D and technology oriented, not by setting up their own facilities. I think there is a great ecosystem of CSIR labs in India, 30, 40 labs, underutilized in terms of industry connect. They do great work, but the connect with industry is less. So MSMEs need to plug into that quite a bit. So there are a number of steps, and we really need to learn from the MSME ecosystems in some of the good manufacturing countries, like I said, Germany, Japan, Korea, Italy, and how they've developed their MSMEs, how the government and industry have worked together to create a strong ecosystem. And these are all family-run businesses in all these places, right? So some of these things won't help us in the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, but otherwise we'll keep discussing this MSME issue 10 years from now. So if you do some of these steps, hopefully the problem will become less and less. Immediately, I think we need to help them with their liquidity. We need to make sure that they get their payments on time. Apart from bank credits, etc., which some of them may not get, we need to make sure that wherever their payments are stuck with governments, both at the center and state, or with big companies, we help them by paying them on time. These are small things which are very important for them in the immediate term, and make the ease of doing business and compliance much easier for them. Because like you said, the formalization of the economy has also increased their costs. Yeah. And how do you make sure that we help them deal with that in the most efficient way possible?
One final question to you then, sir. One other emerging thread is rising and sticky inflation, something we haven't seen for a while now. You're the man who's at the helm of affairs at Tata Steel. Prices are improving for both flats and rolls. that's quite obvious, and many people are now talking about a global commodity and materials super cycle. Do you believe that that's what it is that is underway, and what ramifications do you think that might have on growth then if inflation remains on this kind of upward trajectory as well?
Yeah. So I think prices in some of these commodities or some of these products fluctuate quite wildly, partly because of fundamentals and partly because of the speculative kind of interest that there is. But at a very fundamental level, I think there are some structural changes happening. The last 10 years was dominated by China exports, right? If I look at 2000 to 2010, it was China growth, which drove a lot of economic activity and commodity prices. 2010 to 2020 was more about China exporting a lot of stuff. And they set prices in global markets, which were on an average lower than it was between 2000 and 2010, right? So I'm seeing 2020 to 30 as a period where on an average, the prices for most commodities will be higher than we've seen in the last decade. I'm not saying that today's prices will be there for 10 years. All I'm saying is on an average, it'll be higher, right? So to that extent, we have to be ready for a slightly different kind of thing. Of course, that will translate into most efficient use of some of these materials, or people will look for alternates, people will find more efficient ways to use it. But I also think that will trigger an investment cycle, because these are all, when the commodity cycle is good, you will have more investments, come back, more capacity. So that cycle goes on. The reason why there is so much of spiking is it takes 3 years to build a steel plant, or maybe 5 years or 10 years. So, so it doesn't happen overnight. Production cannot keep up with demand when it fluctuates. And there's a lot of speculative demand in all this. So at a very fundamental level, yes, I don't know if I'll call it a super cycle, but I would certainly say we have to get used to higher average prices than we've seen in the last 10 years.
I wish you luck. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope the industry continues to speak for everyone's interests and looks out for the benefit of all bottom up. Thank you very much for your time today and for speaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.